Welcome back to another episode of the RCT Pod. In this week's episode, we discuss about the most common type of racism in India, casual racism. Calling somebody Kalu or your mother's obsession with having a fair complexion are just some of the examples of casual racism around us. Somehow, we have become so comfortable with it that we have stopped acknowledging it. So I guess it's time to talk about it. As usual, in the final segment, we share our recommendations for you, so keep listening. Before we go ahead, we would like to thank all our listeners who reached out to us with their feedback and support. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can connect with us on Instagram at rctpod or on our email ID, which is rainingchatsandtalks@gmail.com. We will leave the links to the same in the episode description, so do check it out. And with that, let's get back to the episode. So Harman, a few days ago, an incident happened in the United States of America where an African American person named George Floyd was killed in broad daylight by the policemen. Would you like to elaborate on the incident that happened?
George Floyd, a 46-year-old African man, he died in Minneapolis in America. He was being restrained by the police, and the whole footage of the incident was it went viral on all social media platforms, where it showed an officer literally kneeling on his neck as he gasped for breath. And obviously, it brought to the fore a lot of concerns over the law enforcement's bias against the whole community and the minority, and is the most recent incident of a racially driven brutality.
So this type of racism is called institutional racism that we see in the police departments or the government departments, and because of this, everybody's talking about a lot of global racism and a lot of incidents that have been happening with them and their experiences. People are sharing them on social media. So Harman, I have decided that we should talk about casual racism that happens back in our home, in our backyards in India, and which is something that people don't address it every day, and that is something that is happening around us almost all the time.
But Samad, before we say anything, I just want to mention that whatever we're going to mention in the episode are going to be our own personal beliefs, and we do not intend to hurt anyone by what we say. And the whole purpose here, as you mentioned, is to initiate a discussion where everyone is entitled to put their opinions forward. So that's the whole point of the
Absolutely.
episode.
So Arman, one of the incidents that I can recall from my childhood is that my mom used to tell me that I should not have chai because that would result in dark skin. And before that, I never thought about this, difference in light skins or fair skins or dark skins. And I think Indians are really obsessive with the whole idea of fair skin.
It's imbibed in us. Even till date, I still have my mom telling me dozens of face packs so that my skin remained light. And this obsession I completely understand with all the history that we have of caste system, and the bottom line of the caste system known as Dalits. They are dark skinned, so it's obviously connected with that. And I mean, it's so deeply imbibed in our culture that it's so difficult. Imagine the fairness creams. Nobody in my it was so late in my life I realized that the fairness creams and the ads that I see are so offensive. I mean, nobody pointed it out. Nobody thought it was offensive. In fact, it was a big selling point for a lot of brands.
Absolutely. The BBC once reported that in South Asia, more skin lightening creams are sold than bottles of Coca-Cola. And that really shows that, not just Indians, probably all of the South Asians, we are all very obsessed with having fair skins. But a good move by government, fairness creams have been banned. Like the promotion and advertisement of them has been banned,
Hmm.
but not their. I think they're still sold in the market, right?
Yes, they are
I
obviously, but
think
they
I've
won't
seen
be able
that
to
Fair
endorse
and
it
Lovely.
as a fairness cream.
I think we've all seen that Fair and Lovely somewhere or the other at some place, it's such a common thing in Indian household.
Hmm.
And I still don't understand, like, with the whole skin color, like, even if a girl has to get married, skin color is a very important factor in deciding that.
Huh, I don't know. I mean, women are often advised to use all kinds of things to lighten their savla rang. But personally, I believe I find it very beautiful. Priyanka Chopra went 4 to 5 shades darker because when she realized that it's actually, her features are enhanced more if she's a bit dark skinned, and she was appreciated for her color. So you would see in a lot of pictures that she's not actually as dark as she is now, and she completely carried it. And I think that was a big move.
So Harman, I have a thought here. Okay, so I was just thinking about, and I was just reading about this, that why Indians are very obsessed with the fair skin. And I came to this theory that back in the day, a lot of fair skinned people, like, they were the people who were working in offices, they had proper homes, so naturally they were not tanned by working in the sun, so they had fair skin and they had lighter shade of a skin. uh, on the other hand, people who were working outside, doing labor work, and जितने भी लोग काम कर रहे हैं, कारपेंटर्स जो पत्थर तोड़ रहे हैं and all, construction workers and everything, all of those people were working in direct sunlight, so they had a lot of tanning on their skin. So probably, in a few years along the lines, it got associated with, that fair skinned people are superior and they are probably rich and come uh, from a higher strata of the society, whereas the dark skinned people come from the lower strata of the society.
Yeah,
Do you think
this.
something like this makes sense? Because uh, that I think that's what I came to, and then that's what I was able to understand from all the debates and all the discussions people have been doing.
Samarth, I think there's a lot of like layers. You're very right in one sense. I mean, mindset किसका कैसे बदला और किस चीज से trigger हुआ? It could be anything. As I said, connections can be drawn from anything. Also, because a lot of developing countries and a lot of countries that were developing at the time, also back in like fourth, fifth century, when slavery was still in place. Even India's history of racial injustice dates back to the same time when slaves were brought by from Africa, and that community still exists in India called the Siddhi community, and they're spread across India and Pakistan. And despite being Indian for centuries, they're still largely viewed as outsiders. So they were brought by from there. The slaves worked. So even now, the developing countries have dark-skinned people. So maybe that is also one connection. And then obviously, it's being endorsed in such even in movies it gets endorsed like that. I remember watching so many movies also where this kind of discrimination was being made. Have you watched that movie called Planet of the Apes?
No, I have not. I have not.
So
What happened in that?
Planet of the Apes is like, so it's obviously the original movie was made in 1968, and it's racist. Like even though monkeys are controlling the world, so it's not a world of humans. So where
Okay.
light skinned apes are like take over the earth and control dark skinned apes, and they
Okay.
also subdue the remaining human survivors. So even in a world where apes take over the world, there always be racism. So that's why you see so many of these things in so many places that it almost becomes your natural thought.
So why do you think we as people and we as citizens, we are not protesting for all of those things when a movie is made something like this? And I mean, you can clearly see that something racist is there and something based on a color is projected in the movie. Why do you think we are not protesting about that? Don't you think if we are protesting about any racist incident like it happened in the US, about the George Floyd incident, we should be coming up and we should be raising our voices for the casual racism also that is happening around?
Obviously, and it is, I think when you talk about, like, this is a very general question, that what should you do when you encounter casual racism? If you see something, or if you're in a discussion where you point out, or you can see that someone is trying to disgrace a particular community or a person because of his race, uh, I think speaking up matters, and starting conversation matter. If you can pull out that person, pull them aside, even if it's one of your friends or family, and ask them what they mean by their comment. A lot of times people pay attention and realize that they were wrong when they have to explain their joke. They simply feel embarrassing. And you can go on the websites, I think, ask the movie makers and put questions. I think they're very available now because of social. social media. So anything you find off, you can just raise a conversation about it, and a lot of people would come and back you up, I'm sure.
But Harman, what do you think? Like, what form and how much racism, or like just casual racism, as we are speaking about, is acceptable? Like, I see in a lot of stand-up comedy acts where these comedians, they're using some phrases which are a little racist, but probably they're just, for that context of that joke or for that set they're doing, and at that moment it does not seem to be a very big problem, or it does not seem to hurt any community at that point of time. Do you think that much is acceptable and there has to be like a threshold for that?
You know what, I wanted to ask you this question. I mean, because I have a very twisted question of this, because I think you'll be able to answer both. uh, do you think you can't joke about things? I mean, do you think being a non-racist, or even if it's subtle form of racism, do you think that means you'll be less funny, or you won't be able to joke about things?
I think, Harman, we are doing a lot of things under the disclaimer system that we have developed. If we are giving a disclaimer about something and we are doing that in that boundaries, that somehow it becomes acceptable. But at the same time, I think, doing it casually, doing it in a funny way or just jokingly,
Hmm.
it's fine until and unless it becomes like a trend. Like if I see so many people joking about it, then it becomes a problem. If I see a couple of people doing it, then it probably is not a problem. So it depends at what scale it is happening.
Hmm.
According to me, like that would be, I think, my answer to this question, that if we are if we are seeing it, we have to see the perspective and we have to see the reference. Let's say something like George Floyd getting killed in broad daylight is a very big incident to ignite this whole debate about it. But probably if a comedian is saying something in a stand-up act, in a 1 hour show, somewhere in Gurgaon or somewhere in Mumbai, uh, you know to a handful of people in that auditorium or in that club, probably that does not ignite that thing, or that does not hurt any community.
I think, Samat, I agree with you to a big extent. But from like how I understand, if I have to answer the same question, I think for me, racism is also about like impact as it is about intention. So, for example, if I say something out of complete, like I just want to be funny, and I say something and I have no intention of hurting anybody or pointing out to a community, but if I receive feedback later on in the show, or after the conversation has ended, then I would like to take that feedback. I would, and if I genuinely hurt someone, I would like to apologize later. So that is being responsible. So even if you did something in a very right intention, I think you still hold the responsibility to apologize to someone you might have hurt in the process. So it is also about impact, because you have to think about people at the receiving end. Make sure that they take it as it is and not feel hurt.
Exactly, I think I totally agree with what you've said. And like the point that you mentioned here, when we're trying to be funny, we cross a lot of boundaries, we cross a lot of lines sometimes unknowingly also. uh, and I think that is the problem. We don't know where to give the benefit of doubt to which person and at which place.
Hmm.
आई थिंक कई बार ऐसा होता है कि हम लोग कुछ बोल देते हैं एंड वी जस्ट सेड इट इन अ वेरी कैजुअल वे एंड पीपल अराउंड अस गेट ऑफेंडेड एंड I think I have been into a lot of fights when back in the day when I was in college,
I want
and
to
I
ask
was
you this question. Have
yeah
you
I
ever
was
been in
young.
one of these positions where you feel you might have like
Yes, I
pointed
have
out
been.
something? Like, were you in the receiving end, or like were you one of the people that could have
See,
been
to be
slightly
very
racist?
honest, I have said many things that have offended people, and probably I have said a lot. I have passed on some racist comments and remarks as well. But at the same time, I also realized it that what I did was wrong, and I did not do it. After like a couple of years, I realized it probably after half an hour or 1 hour. I have even apologized to that people if I said something to them. So yes, I have done it, and I think regular people do that. On that note, I want to say this: that acknowledging that fact, if anybody is doing it, acknowledgement is very important.
Hmm.
If you're acknowledging it that you did it, and you're admitting it that you did it, and you can apologize, or just at least try to tell that person that you did not intend to do it, you did it in you got carried away with whatever emotions you had at that point of time. I think you can make things right at that point of time only. You don't need to make it a very big issue.
Exactly. I mean, imagine you and me were both in, like you still are, but we were both in Delhi for a very long time. And in cities like Delhi, with people from like everywhere, racism is so casual that it seems perfectly natural to many locals. And I've seen so many people staring at a particular kind of people in the metro, or just being ignorant, like all South Indians are now.
We've seen a lot of racism in Delhi against the northeastern people.
What is, yeah,
I mean,
that is what I was
that
asking.
is very dominant
So, do you feel it was the
in Delhi.
main sort of discrimination that I felt in Delhi, being in Delhi University? I think it was one community that was facing the most, taking the most bullshit.
Yes, I have witnessed this, that guys on bike, when they were just passing around somebody and they saw somebody, saw some northeastern, they would call them with different phrases like momos, go back to Nepal, go back to China.
Yeah.
And uh, and this happened with a friend also, and that's how I know that this happens, and this is the reality. Even though we have tried a lot of times that, I mean, in Delhi University there's a whole wing about discrimination against the northeastern people, and there's a whole community out there who supports them, but still people do it. Coming to my like next question for you would be that how do you think we can educate people about this? Like, when we were in school, I don't think we got any education about this topic, or we were, any awareness or anything that was told to us about this. And I think we were very racist back in school also, but nobody pointed out at that time, and we were doing it casually, and probably that became a part of our lives now. So how do you think it can be imbibed into the education system, so that the students who are growing up now, and they will be probably, when they go to college, they realize and they are aware enough that they don't have to discriminate against people and their fellow colleagues.
I think Samarth, and there's a lot of change that has come. I wouldn't deny that, because there are a lot of things that we would say back in time, or like my were very normal in my parents' time, but people obviously don't say that anymore. Fat shaming is not prevalent, at least that much. So a lot of things change by the time. My sibling is very sensitive towards all these things. He understands how sexism can be, very hurtful for females. So it has, with the number of voices that we have from the internet, from social media, and from mainstream media, and the kind of sensitivity that we're getting, a lot of people are standing up as a consequence of that. We have voices that can point this out now. So if I'm sensitive enough, then I would be, and if I'm in a group where something like this is happening, I wouldn't mind pointing out to that person and making sure that he feels embarrassed by the end of what he said, and at least apologizes. So it comes from, I mean, even in college, where I remember my classmate wasn't being given accommodation. Landlords were charging very high because they thought that they couldn't, that my classmate couldn't bargain in Hindi, and so I had to stand up for him. I went with him. I had a chat, and I made sure that he felt that there were people also, like, who did not feel that he was any different. So being warm to people, and not discriminating personally, is also a big step forward. If everyone understands that, I think it'll solve a big problem.
There are kids, I have seen kids calling some people, like Kala or Kalu. They're small kids, about 10 years or 11 years of age. And how do you explain racism to them? How do you explain them that what you are saying to somebody is not acceptable? When you grow up, somebody is going to you're going to offend somebody. How do you tell that 10-year or 11-year-old kid?
I think everyone, I would simply saying that, I mean, everyone has flaws. And I'm sure that kid would also have flaws. So explaining to him and making him understand, if somebody points, this thing out of you, then how would you feel? And if somebody calls you fat, or if somebody calls you skinny, or if somebody points out something that you lack, how would you feel? So I think kids have their own way of understanding things, and parents and teachers obviously have a big role. If parents are a bad example, so if imagine you have
Exactly,
workers coming
exactly.
in your home and you treat them differently, you do not let them sit at your own level, and if you do not so there was this time where I called one of our workers as kudewala, and my mom was very tough with me on this, and she said she is not kudewala. He's actually picking, he's actually the cleaning person. He's actually cleaning it. So he has a name. Like, ask him. And from that day, I think I was like 4 or 5 years old. Since that day till today, I've always called workers at my home from their name. And we give equal respect to everyone around and
I think
acknowledge
what
that
you've
they're
mentioned,
helpful.
yeah, I think what you've mentioned is a very correct thought, and even I have the same thought that for kids growing up right now, I think parents carry most of the responsibility there, and जैसे हमारे पेरेंट्स हमारे आसपास एक्ट कर रहे हैं या जो भी चीज़ें बोल रहे हैं वी लर्न दैट kids learn that only. So I think parents carry a lot of responsibility early on, and they need to realize that they don't call people like this by these names. That ensures that probably the kid will also grow up to a person who will not do that. I think what you've shared, the story that you shared, is very correct.
So, and also about some of like the general stereotypes that we have in India, कि South Indians हैं तो काले हैं. Not just in India, like even abroad. Have you seen those movies or where they show exaggerated accent of Indians?
Exactly.
And
North Indians are considered to be superior for some reason, and South
yeah,
Indians are considered to be inferior in India. That is a trend. We
yeah.
can see that pattern.
So whether it's the Bindi or over-exaggerated accent of Indians or labeling all Asians as Chinese. So these general sort of stereotypes, and when they come into play, what do you think about that? How do you like, because it's such a big platform, how many people are you going to ask?
See, for me, like when I see movies, sometimes sometimes I have two thoughts. Okay, so my mind is divided on this. That sometimes I think that they are showing what the truth is, and that is, I think, fine. So with the movies showing North Indian and South Indian, because I think that is one of the sources from where we learn that what the difference is. But at the same time, I think you know that is what is there in the society, and that what prevails, and that's what we have seen while growing up. I think this is like a loop that has formed, probably like whatever sources that we get influenced from, we start feeling like South Indians are really humble people, and they're very simple people as compared to North Indians who are a little, they show off a little bit, and they try to act a little arrogant sometimes. Like that's what I think. Not trying to hurt anybody's sentiments here, but that's what like a general attitude that I see in both the communities. And probably because of that, a lot of sources, whatever entertainment sources that we have, and from whatever media that we are consuming the content, आई थिंक उसकी वजह से हमारा ना एक नोशन बन गया है. वी हैव लाइक हमने एक स्टीरियोटाइप बना लिया है. आई वुड से दिस वर्ड स्टीरियोटाइप हो चुका है ये,
Hmm.
कि हम नॉर्थ इंडियंस को सुपीरियर मानने लग गए हैं बिकॉज ऑफ द होल पॉम्प एंड शो दे हैव, एंड साउथ इंडियन सिंपल हम्बल पीपल जो कुछ नहीं कहते एक दूसरे को इतना ज़्यादा, एंड दे माइंड देयर ओन बिजनेस एंड दे लव टू बी इन देयर ओन कम्युनिटी. सो वी हैव ट्राइड टू सप्रेस them as like the inferior, probably.
एंड आई थिंक उसका ग्लोबली जो इम्पैक्ट है उस वजह से भी बहुत प्रॉब्लमेटिक है. आई मीन दिस इज नॉट समथिंग कलरिज्म, इट्स नॉट समथिंग which is born in India. Colorism is something which has been there globally, and something needs to be done about that. Kim Kardashian was called out for casual racism just recently, where she had a picture. She posted a picture of one of her brands where a black model is wearing a black mask, and that was discussed. And so even brands, fashion designers are very careful when they come out with such campaigns. So even Bollywood can be like that. Just because something is going to sell should not be a point to like if you to include. I mean, they hold a big responsibility, but a lot of times they don't realize it.
एग्जैक्टली दैट वाज एग्जैक्टली माय पॉइंट कि हमारे आसपास इतने सारे इन्फ्लुएंसर्स हैं.
Hmm.
इट कैन बी एनीथिंग, इट कैन बी म्यूजिक वीडियोस, इट कैन बी मूवीज, इट कैन बी टीवी shows, because this is the content that we consume on everyday basis. So whatever we see there, we get influenced, and that's what a stereotype we make in our heads. But coming back to the global racism point, like you mentioned, the Kardashian, what she did and everything. My question is on this is like, I have a thought, like the whole Black Lives Matter, this organization that came up and everything, and in response to that, there has been a community which says all lives matter, and somewhere or the other I agree this that I mean, what Black Lives Matter, the organization, they are doing, that is totally fine, but the point of discussion should be that all lives matter.
The reason why Black Lives Matter, the organization, felt it was taking their limelight away, and at the time where the person, the victim, has been a black person, so obviously they'll have to be addressed at this point first. And it's not like it's the only, and they mentioned it, it's not like we're saying the only Black Lives Matter. We're addressing it right now because this is the issue. Obviously, if it was for a different person and if it was a different community, then we can obviously become one. But
No, but do you think if a white person had been killed in place of George Floyd, similar, with the protest would have been with similar intensity?
then it would have been police brutality, a case of police brutality and bullying. Because white supremacy
Exactly.
exists and everybody knows that. The people pulled out most for all the crimes in America, in a country like America, are mostly blacks. I mean, there is a documentary made on Netflix. I don't remember the name. I think it is called 13th. Yeah, it's a documentary which analyzes criminalization of offenses of African Americans. And there was a time where US prisons were filled with black people. So imagine, it was so easy for a person to be named as a criminal or to be criminalized, and the chances of him being like him landing in a prison would be many more than a normal white person. And the same thing happens here when African Americans come to our country. I mean, I've researched about this, I've heard about cases where even like Indians' obsession with foreigners, right? So when white people come, we'd be all excited, are foreigners, foreigners. But when it's the African American or the black community, they're often discriminated against. It happened in Delhi University as well, where one African American was denied being given something because he was perceived as someone who was a thief or someone who would like have a knife. They have a common perception made for them, and they object to it, and they try and convince us that they're as dear to us as other foreigners. And but I think it doesn't change the fact that they're discriminated against.
So, Arman, talking about casual racism in India, do you think we have racism in the music industry as well?
Would you want to tell me about it?
Like, there are songs which, try to highlight, like, if you see the music videos only, in most of the music videos, especially in India, I see only uh, girls who are fair skinned.
Yeah,
We see foreign girls now who are fair skinned.
yeah. And even lyrics of a lot of songs are like Gore Chitte, Rangdi types, endorsing.
There was in the movie Bazigar, Shah Rukh Khan was singing "Ye kali kali aankhein, ye gore gore gaal."
Hmm.
In Tashan movie, there was this song "White White Face Dekhe, Dilwa Beating Fast." In this song also, they're talking about the fair skin only,
Yeah.
and there are like countless popular songs which celebrate fair skin just like them. Do you think this is again, coming back to that point, that this is like comes into the category of acceptable casual racism?
Yeah, so much so that it's become natural and nobody's pointing out. So we need one voice, one logical voice that comes and explains, and I think as a generation, um, our generation is, I think, a little aware to all of this. And it's the same reason why a lot of white people were also protesting against the authorities in the protest that's happening in America against racism. So a lot of people who are not at the receiving end of it also have a responsibility to change the system. So if imagine a white someone in the Bollywood industry who's an established actress who comes up and says, "Oh, listen, but I'm getting my roles because of my looks, but this needs to change. I was very impressed when Deepika Padukone changed her this thing, even if she was playing an acid attack victim. But it takes a lot of guts to change your face like that and make it look normal. And for an actress like her, you know, so I think they have a big responsibility to change the kind of roles they're doing, and maybe letting other girls, other talented actresses enter. I think Radhika Apte is a very good example. She looks so good, but she's not the mainstream white girl in the Bollywood. So a lot of actresses like her, I think, are changing it for us.
In the airlines industry also, Harman. So I was speaking to one of my friends, and she had applied to some airlines to for a flight attendant job. So she told me that there's like a policy that they only employ fair hostesses as cabin crew.
Oh my god.
And although it was like okay if the ground staff were dark, but for the cabin crew they only want fair hostesses. Like if there's so I have not checked this, but if there's a written policy in any of their documents and the airlines say this out front that they are only going to employ fair hostesses as cabin crew, why are we not speaking about that? Why are we
Yeah,
not raising
that was my
uh,
first reaction.
our voice for that?
It should have been protested against. I mean, she should have taken it further. Legally, if you fight a battle for it, you have big chances now, because a lot of our laws were written back in the time, and there are a lot of loopholes that the companies get into. So I think if somebody can point it out and maybe bring it to the forefront, then at the age of today where everything spreads like a wildfire, there are big chances of it getting discussed upon, and then maybe the airlines would be held accountable for what their policy is.
So, Harman, on final thoughts, I feel like, casual racism is something that, is something that we have grown up with. And probably that is something that is going to stay with us for a very long time. All we can do is at our part is that, we should be more careful in our everyday life that we are not, hurting anybody's sentiments. And if we are doing it unknowingly, for whatsoever reason, I think we should admit it, we should apologize for it, and I think we should make people more aware. At least we can do that much. What do you think?
And also, just add to your this thing, we should also choose leadership that is less, like, that is not racist. Imagine if it was not for Trump at this point in time, if they had a better leader who would not endorse racism on a daily basis, the situation would have been very different, because people who are even slightly white supremacists or racist, they would get a lot of back from these kind of leaders. So yeah, we should choose leadership that we know are responsible enough to keep these things, these social issues aside, and would not at any circumstance side those criminals.
Right. Also further adding to this, I think like people, the way they are protesting, I think protesting is not wrong. You can protest as much as you want. In a democratic country, you have that freedom of asking questions to your government and asking for an action for that. But I don't think violence should be a part of any protest, and I don't think violence is not a solution to anything.
Hmm.
I was seeing this video, Herman, and I was really uh, you know disturbed by watching it, that the protesters, they came and they burnt a homeless man's mattress on which he was sleeping for I don't know how many long years, and he was an old man. They just came, they put the mattress on fire, and they just seem to have fun. They
That's
were
very
breaking windows of the shops, of the showrooms. I don't think that is acceptable, and I don't endorse that.
hmm.
If you want to do protest, if you want to raise a voice, do it in the right way. Change yourself, spread the awareness on everyday basis. Don't wait for such incidents to happen. Don't wait for another George Floyd incident to happen, that you take down the streets and you start to change every other person on the planet. I think this is something that we need to develop in our everyday life, and it has to be a part of our habit.
Yes. And on this note, let's move to this week's recommendations.
Well, I was, watching this stand-up comedy special by Kenny Sebastian, or as he's also known
I
as
love it.
Kenneth Sebastian. So yeah, his Netflix stand-up special came by the name the most interesting person in the room. And okay, so I have been a fan of Kenny Sebastian, and he has been one of those people who was the first person in the stand-up comedy industry. So, but yeah, I think it was a nice special. I really liked it. But again, I think it's a very different kind of comedy. It's not like Zakir Khan and a lot of Vipul Goyal and other stand-up comedians that we have in India. It's very different. But yeah, nevertheless, I love the special, and that's going to be my pick for the week.
Okay, so well, for me, because we were going to talk about this topic, and I was quickly reminded of something I'd watched a few months back, but I really liked it. It's a serial called When They See Us. It's on Netflix. It's about five teens that are falsely accused of brutal attack, and it's based on a true story. So go and watch it. It's very intriguing. It brings out a big social issue out of the forefront, but at the same time gives you a lot of entertainment. That's my pick.
If you like the episode, don't forget to follow us wherever you are listening. You can also leave us a high rating on Apple Podcasts, as it helps other people to discover us. We will see you very soon in another episode. So till then, take care and keep smiling.